Christmas Eve was supposed to be magical. I'd planned the perfect evening for our family. Matching pajamas, cookies for Santa, and a classic movie marathon with Jacob and Emma. At 7 and 5 years old, they were still at the perfect age to believe in the magic of the season. I wanted to freeze these moments in time, to soak up the joy before the harsh realities of the world could creep in. But this year, something was off. Lisa, my wife of 8 years, wasn't herself. She'd been distant for months, distracted by her phone and slipping away on more work trips than ever before. I chalked it up to stress, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. That evening, the kids were buzzing with excitement, their laughter filling the house as they arranged cookies and a glass of milk for Santa. Lisa joined in, her smile tight and her laugh forced. She excused herself multiple times, disappearing upstairs with her phone. By the time we settled in to watch Home Alone, Lisa had retreated again, claiming she needed to finish wrapping gifts. The kids didn't notice. They were too absorbed in Kevin McAllister's antics, but I couldn't ignore the knot forming in my stomach. I decided to check on her. Quietly, I made my way upstairs. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and I saw her sitting on the bed, her phone in her hands, her expression tense. She didn't notice me at first. Then, as if sensing my presence, she looked up and quickly locked her screen. "What's wrong?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Nothing," she said, her tone clipped. "Just finishing some last-minute things." I didn't press her. Instead, I forced a smile and told her the kids wanted her to join us downstairs. She nodded but didn't move. Back in the living room, I tried to focus on the kids, but Lisa's behavior lingered in the back of my mind like a dark cloud. By the time the kids were in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As I tidied up the kitchen, Lisa's phone buzzed on the counter. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about it. I trusted her, or at least, I used to. But tonight, with everything that had been building, I couldn't resist. The message on the screen made my blood run cold. "Merry Christmas, babe. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Red heart." I stared at the words, my heart pounding. The sender was someone named Mark. I didn't recognize the name, but the tone of the message was unmistakable. For a moment, I stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Then, driven by equal parts fear and anger, I unlocked the phone. She hadn't changed her passcode. The conversation thread confirmed my worst fears. Mark wasn't just a coworker. He was someone Lisa had been meeting with, intimately. Flirty messages, selfies taken in hotel rooms, plans to sneak away. It was all there in black and white. The sound of footsteps jolted me out of my daze. Lisa appeared in the doorway, her eyes narrowing when she saw me holding her phone. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp. My hands were trembling. "Who's Mark?" I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. Her face paled for a moment before hardening. "He's just a friend," she said quickly, her tone defensive. I raised the phone, showing her the messages. "Does this look like just a friend to you?" Her jaw tightened, and she crossed her arms. "I don't want to do this right now, Eric. It's late, and the kids are asleep. Can we not ruin Christmas?" "Ruin Christmas?" I repeated, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. "You've already ruined it, Lisa. You've been lying to me, to the kids, sneaking around with this guy behind my back. What else is there to say?" She didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed the phone from my hand and stormed upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my mind racing. The betrayal was suffocating, the weight of it pressing down on me like a vice. This wasn't just a bad dream I could wake up from. This was my reality now. Eventually, I collapsed onto the couch, the glow of the Christmas tree casting faint shadows on the walls. The house was silent again, but my thoughts weren't. The woman I'd built my life with, the mother of my children, had been living a lie, and now there was no going back. Morning came too quickly. The soft light filtering through the blinds felt like a cruel spotlight on the chaos of the night before. The house was quiet except for the hum of the heater, but the tension hung heavy, pressing against my chest. I'd spent the night on the couch, staring at the Christmas tree as the glow of its lights flickered on and off. My thoughts had raced endlessly, alternating between disbelief, anger, and sadness. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that message on Lisa's phone. Those words seared into my brain. "Merry Christmas, babe." The sound of small feet pattering down the stairs snapped me out of my daze. Jacob appeared first, his bedhead sticking up in every direction. "Daddy, is it morning? Did Santa come?" Emma followed close behind, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny. Her eyes lit up when she saw the presents under the tree, and the sight of their excitement tugged at my heart. Whatever turmoil Lisa and I were going through, they couldn't know. Not today. "Yeah, Santa came," I said, forcing a smile. "Merry Christmas, buddy." "Merry Christmas," Jacob shouted, running to the tree. Emma squealed and followed, her little hands reaching for the brightly wrapped gifts. Lisa appeared at the top of the stairs a moment later. She was composed, her face betraying no hint of the argument from the night before. She descended slowly, brushing her hair back and putting on a smile that felt as fake as mine. "Merry Christmas," she said, her voice light and cheerful. I didn't respond. The kids dove into their presents, tearing through the wrapping paper with gleeful abandon. I sat on the floor with them, helping Jacob assemble a complicated Lego set while Emma squealed over her new dollhouse. Lisa hovered in the background, snapping photos on her phone, her actions mechanical. The morning passed in a blur of laughter and chaos, but underneath it all, the tension between Lisa and me simmered. Every glance we exchanged was loaded with unspoken words, accusations, and guilt. I avoided her as much as I could, focusing entirely on the kids. By the time breakfast was over, the knot in my stomach had tightened into something unbearable. The effort of pretending, of smiling and laughing, was exhausting. When the kids were distracted with their toys, I cornered Lisa in the kitchen. She was rinsing dishes, her back to me. "We need to talk," I said quietly. Her shoulders stiffened, but she didn't turn around. "Eric, not today. Let's not ruin the kids' Christmas." "Don't act like I'm the one ruining things," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "You've already done that." She turned to face me, her expression guarded. "What do you want me to say?" "I want the truth," I said, stepping closer. "I want to know why. Why him? Why now? And how long has this been going on?" She glanced toward the living room, where Jacob and Emma were playing. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't want to do this here. Not with them in the house." My jaw clenched. I wanted to keep pushing, to demand answers right then and there, but she was right. The kids couldn't hear this. "Not now." "Fine," I said. "But this conversation isn't over. We're going to talk about this. Soon." She didn't respond, turning back to the sink instead. The rest of the day passed in much the same way. We kept up the facade for Jacob and Emma's sake, but every smile, every laugh felt like a performance. Lisa and I barely spoke to each other, the tension so thick it felt like a physical presence in the room. That night, after the kids were in bed, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the Christmas tree. The once warm glow of the lights now felt cold, sterile, like they belonged to someone else's home. Lisa passed by on her way upstairs, pausing in the doorway. "Good night," she said softly, her tone almost apologetic. I didn't look at her. "Good night," I muttered. As she disappeared up the stairs, I felt a strange mix of relief and despair. Relief that I didn't have to face her tonight, and despair because I knew the confrontation was inevitable. I couldn't keep living like this, pretending everything was fine while my world crumbled around me. Something had to give. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow, I'd make her talk. The next evening, I'd had enough. After spending the day avoiding me and gluing herself to her phone, Lisa had made it clear she had no intention of addressing what happened. But I wasn't letting it slide. The kids were in bed, their laughter replaced by the quiet hum of the heater. I waited until she came downstairs. She spotted me sitting on the couch and froze. "Eric," she said, her voice tight, "I don't want to do this tonight." "Too bad," I said, standing. "We're doing it now." She rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. "Fine. What do you want?" "How long?" I asked, stepping closer. She glanced away, her lips pressing into a thin line. "A few months," she said finally, her tone indifferent. Her nonchalance hit me harder than the admission itself. A few months, I repeated. While I've been here taking care of everything, you've been sneaking off with him? It's not like that, she snapped, straightening. Then explain it to me, I said coldly. Because it looks exactly like that. Her face hardened. You don't get it. I felt trapped, stuck in the same routine every single day. Mark reminded me what it's like to matter. I let out a bitter laugh. Mattered? To who? Because you certainly didn't think about us, about Jacob and Emma, when you were with him. Don't bring the kids into this, she said sharply. This has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with them. I shot back. You didn't just betray me, Lisa. You betrayed our family. Her jaw tightened, and she scoffed. Oh, spare me the self-righteousness, Eric. I've sacrificed everything for this family. Maybe I deserve something for myself for once. Something for yourself? I said, incredulous. So, lying to my face for months is your idea of self-care? Her tone turned icy. Maybe if you'd paid attention to me, this wouldn't have happened. The words hit like a slap, but I forced myself to stay composed. Don't put this on me, I said. You had a choice, Lisa, and you chose to throw it all away. She looked away, arms still crossed. I didn't throw anything away. I'm just trying to figure out what I want. I stared at her, my anger giving way to something heavier. Do you even want to fix this? She hesitated, then said quietly, I don't know. The air left my lungs. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at her. Then I nodded and turned toward the door. Eric, she called after me, but I didn't stop. The cold air outside was biting, but it felt better than the suffocating tension inside the house. The cold air outside hit me hard, but it was nothing compared to the chill in my chest. I walked to the car without a plan, needing distance from Lisa and everything she'd said. My hands were shaking, though whether it was from anger or exhaustion, I couldn't tell. I drove aimlessly at first, the empty streets of the neighborhood glowing faintly under the streetlights. My mind replayed her words on a loop. I don't know. That hesitation, that indifference, cut deeper than anything else. After everything we'd built together, she couldn't even commit to whether it was worth saving. Eventually, I ended up at a small park a few miles away, the same one where I used to take Jacob and Emma to play on weekends. The swings hung motionless in the icy air, and the playground was deserted. I parked the car and sat there, gripping the steering wheel as waves of anger and grief rolled over me. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. I thought about the life we'd built, the late nights comforting colicky babies, the weekends spent at soccer games and ballet recitals, the quiet evenings we used to share once the kids were asleep. It wasn't always perfect, but it was real. Or so I thought. The phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out and saw a text from Lisa. Come home. We can talk later. Later. Like it was just another thing to pencil into her schedule. I didn't reply. Instead, I put the car in drive and headed toward my parents' house. The warm glow of the living room lights greeted me as I pulled into their driveway. My mom opened the door before I even reached the porch, her brow furrowed with concern. Eric, what are you doing here? I stepped inside, the familiar scent of cinnamon and pine washing over me. For a moment, I couldn't answer. Then the words spilled out, raw and unfiltered. Lisa's been cheating, I said, my voice cracking. My mom's hand flew to her mouth, and my dad appeared from the kitchen, his expression grim. They didn't ask questions or offer advice right away. They just let me talk. I told them everything. The messages, the months of secrecy, the way she'd brushed off my pain like it was nothing. When I was done, my dad spoke, his voice steady but firm. You need to protect yourself, Eric, and you need to think about Jacob and Emma. I know, I said, my head in my hands, but I don't even know where to start. Start by figuring out what you want, my mom said softly, resting a hand on my shoulder. It was such a simple statement, but it cut through the fog in my mind. For months, I'd been so focused on Lisa's happiness, on holding the family together, that I'd completely ignored my own needs. For the first time, I allowed myself to think about what I wanted. The drive back home felt different. I wasn't aimless anymore. I had a purpose. I couldn't change what Lisa had done, but I could take control of how this ended. When I walked through the front door, Lisa was sitting in the living room, her arms crossed. She didn't look relieved to see me. If anything, she looked annoyed. "Did you get that out of your system?" she asked, her tone biting. I ignored the jab and closed the door behind me. "We need to set some ground rules," I said, my voice firm. Her eyebrows shot up. "Ground rules?" "Yes," I said, stepping into the room. "If you're serious about figuring this out, then Mark is out of the picture. Completely. No more texts, no more calls, no more meetings." She rolled her eyes. "Eric, you can't just—" "Actually, I can," I interrupted. "Because if you don't cut him off, we're done. No discussion, no second chances." She stared at me, her jaw tightening. "You're giving me ultimatums now?" "Call it whatever you want," I said coldly. "But I'm not going to live like this. You want to work on this marriage? Prove it. Otherwise, we'll start talking about custody arrangements instead." Her face flushed, but she didn't argue. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "Fine," she said finally, her voice low. "I'll cut him off." "Good," I said, heading for the stairs. "Let me know when you've actually done it." Her silence followed me up to the bedroom, but for the first time in days, I felt like I'd regained a shred of control. The next morning, Lisa acted like nothing had happened. She moved around the kitchen, making breakfast for Jacob and Emma, her tone overly cheerful as she talked to them about their new toys. If I hadn't known better, I might have thought it was just another normal day. But I did know better. After breakfast, I caught her in the hallway as she was heading upstairs. "Have you done it?" I asked, keeping my voice low so the kids wouldn't hear. She looked at me blankly. "Done what?" I clenched my jaw. "Cut things off with Mark." Her eyes narrowed, and she crossed her arms. "I said I would, didn't I? Why are you pushing?" "Because I'm not going to live with this hanging over me," I said, stepping closer. "If you're serious about fixing this, I need proof." "Proof?" she said, scoffing. "What do you want, Eric? A screenshot? A notarized letter?" "I want you to show me you mean it," I said, my tone hard. "Call him. Right now. Tell him it's over." Her lips parted, as if she was about to argue, but then she stopped. She stared at me, her expression a mix of irritation and something else. Fear, maybe. Finally, she rolled her eyes and pulled out her phone. "Fine," she said, dialing a number. She put the phone to her ear and turned slightly away, her voice clipped. "Mark? Yeah. I can't talk to you anymore. Whatever this was, it's over. Don't call me again." She hung up without waiting for a response, then shoved the phone back into her pocket. "Happy now," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Ecstatic," I said dryly. "But this is just the start, Lisa. Trust isn't something you rebuild with one phone call." She rolled her eyes again, brushing past me. "Don't push your luck, Eric." Her words lingered in the air, but I refused to let them shake me. I'd drawn the line, and if she crossed it, there would be no going back. Over the next few days, I focused on the kids and myself. I kept busy with work, made plans to take Jacob and Emma to the park, and even scheduled a meeting with a therapist to sort through the mess in my head. Lisa, meanwhile, oscillated between defensiveness and icy silence. She didn't like that I was setting boundaries, and she made it clear she thought I was being controlling. But I didn't care what she thought anymore. This wasn't about her. It was about me reclaiming control of my life. One evening, I came home to find her sitting on the couch, staring at her phone. She looked up when I walked in, her expression unreadable. "We need to talk," she said. I set my bag down and sat across from her. "What is it?" She hesitated, then said, "I've been thinking about what you said. About us. And I want to try counseling." The words took me by surprise. Lisa wasn't the type to admit she needed help, let alone suggest therapy. "Counseling," I repeated. "Yes," she said, her tone defensive. "If we're going to fix this, we need someone to help us figure out how." I studied her, trying to gauge her sincerity. "If you're serious about this, then I'll do it," I said finally. "But only if you're fully committed. No half measures, no more lies." She nodded, though I could see the tension in her jaw. "Fine." A week later, We had our first session. Sitting in the therapist's office felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life. Lisa spoke cautiously, choosing her words carefully as she described feeling trapped and unseen in the marriage. When it was my turn, I didn't hold back. I talked about the betrayal, the lies, and how her actions had shattered my trust. Lisa winced at some of my words, but I didn't care. She needed to hear it. Afterward, I felt lighter, though I wasn't sure if it was progress or just relief at finally letting it all out. By the second session, it became clear that rebuilding would be a slow, painful process. Lisa still bristled when I brought up Mark, and I still struggled to believe her when she said she wanted to make things right. But I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing it for me, and for Jacob and Emma. The therapy sessions grew more strained as the weeks went by. Lisa continued her performance as the remorseful wife, but it was clear to me she was playing a long game. Each session became another opportunity for her to shift blame, portraying herself as a victim in a marriage where she felt ignored and unfulfilled. "I just want to feel like a person again," she said during one session, her voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. The therapist nodded sympathetically, casting a glance in my direction as though I was the cause of all her anguish. I wanted to call her out right then and there, but something held me back. The way Lisa spoke, the precision in her tone, it felt calculated. At home, she was even colder. She rarely spoke to me unless it was about the kids, and when she did, her words were clipped and dismissive. I could feel her contempt simmering beneath the surface, but I wasn't prepared for what she was planning. One evening, I came home from work and found Lisa on the phone in the kitchen. She didn't notice me right away, her back to me as she leaned against the counter. "Yes, I understand. No, I want to make sure everything's in my name. The house, custody. He's not stable, you know? I can say whatever's needed to prove that." I froze. My stomach churned as her words sank in. She turned and saw me, her eyes widening for a fraction of a second before she recovered. "I'll call you back," she said curtly, hanging up. "Who was that?" I asked, my voice steady but sharp. "None of your business," she replied, brushing past me. I grabbed her arm, not hard, but enough to stop her. "You're planning something," I said, meeting her eyes. "I heard you talking about custody." Her lips curled into a smile, a cruel, mocking expression that sent a chill down my spine. "Of course, I'm planning something," she said. "Do you really think I'm going to let you walk away with everything?" "Walk away?" I said, incredulous. "You're the one who cheated, Lisa. You're the one who destroyed this family." "Oh, please," she said, pulling her arm free. "Nobody cares about who cheated, Eric. They care about who's the better parent. And let's face it, you've been so distracted with work, you wouldn't even know where to start with Jacob and Emma on your own." Her words stung, but they also made something click. This wasn't just about the affair anymore. Lisa was trying to take everything, our home, our kids, and leave me with nothing. That night, I went through her laptop. She hadn't bothered to clear her search history, and what I found confirmed my worst fears. There were emails to a divorce lawyer, drafts of custody agreements claiming I was emotionally volatile, and even messages to Mark. "Just a little longer," one of them read. "Once it's settled, I'll be free to move in with you. The house will be ours, and the kids will adjust." I felt sick. She wasn't just trying to leave me. She was plotting to replace me entirely. The next morning, I called my lawyer. "She's planning to fight for full custody," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "She's lying about my stability, and she's using the house as leverage." My lawyer was calm but firm. "Eric, this is serious. If she's building a case, you need to counter it. Start documenting everything. Her behavior, her communication with Mark, anything that proves she's unfit or acting in bad faith. We'll fight this." Over the next few days, I stayed quiet, pretending to go along with Lisa's charade while building my case. I installed security cameras in the common areas of the house, kept detailed records of her absences, and printed every message and email I'd found. Lisa, meanwhile, seemed smug, confident that her plan was working. She started spending more time on her phone, often smiling at messages she didn't bother to hide anymore. "Mark says hi," she said one evening, smirking as she scrolled. I didn't respond. The tipping point came when I overheard her on the phone with Mark again. "Don't worry," she said, her tone light and carefree. "The therapist already thinks I'm the victim. Eric's just digging his own grave every time he loses his temper. By the time this is over, the house will be ours, and the kids won't even miss him." Her laughter sent a wave of rage through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. Bursting in and confronting her would only give her more ammunition for her case. Instead, I recorded the conversation. Lisa's cunning plan had backfired. I wasn't the same passive, trusting husband she'd manipulated for years. She wanted to play dirty, and I was ready to fight back. The weeks leading up to the court hearing were a blur of preparation. Every moment Lisa spent smugly moving forward with her plan, I was working behind the scenes to dismantle it. My lawyer and I left nothing to chance. Every text, email, and conversation I'd recorded painted a clear picture of her betrayal, manipulation, and dishonesty. Lisa, of course, remained oblivious. She carried on as though the house and kids were already hers, treating me like a guest in my own home. She spent hours on the phone with Mark, laughing openly, and occasionally throwing digs my way about how everything would be easier soon. But her arrogance blinded her. She thought she'd won before the battle even began. The court date finally arrived, and I walked into the room with a mix of nerves and determination. Lisa was already there, sitting with her lawyer, her expression calm but smug. She barely glanced at me, as if I was a minor inconvenience in her grand plan. The hearing began with both sides presenting their arguments. Lisa's lawyer painted her as the selfless mother, burdened by an inattentive husband and forced to seek fulfillment elsewhere. They even brought up our therapy sessions, twisting her fabricated grievances into a narrative of neglect. When it was our turn, my lawyer wasted no time dismantling her story. "Your Honor," he began, "we have evidence that Mrs. Sanders has been engaged in an extramarital affair for months. We also have documentation proving that her participation in therapy and her claims of reconciliation were nothing more than a calculated effort to secure the house and full custody of the children." Lisa's confident demeanor faltered for the first time as he presented the evidence. The texts to Mark, the emails to her lawyer outlining her plan to use therapy as a shield, the recorded phone conversations where she openly mocked the process and strategized her takeover with Mark. "This demonstrates not only a lack of good faith," my lawyer continued, "but also a willingness to manipulate the system to her advantage at the expense of her children's well-being." Lisa's face turned pale as the judge reviewed the evidence. She leaned over to her lawyer, whispering furiously, but it was clear there was no rebuttal. When it was my turn to speak, I focused on Jacob and Emma. "This isn't just about a house," I said, my voice steady despite the emotions bubbling beneath the surface. "It's about creating a stable environment for my children. They deserve honesty, security, and parents who put their needs above petty games and personal desires. I've done everything I can to give them that, and I'll keep doing it no matter what." The judge nodded, his expression serious but unreadable. The ruling came a week later. Lisa was awarded partial custody, but the judge made it clear that her actions had undermined her position. I retained the house and primary custody of Jacob and Emma. When the verdict was read, Lisa's mask of composure finally cracked. She stormed out of the courtroom without a word to me, her lawyer trailing behind her. The house felt quieter after that, but it was a relief rather than a burden. Jacob and Emma adjusted quickly, their lives uninterrupted by the upheaval Lisa had tried to create. Lisa moved in with Mark, though their relationship didn't last long. I heard through mutual acquaintances that the stress of losing the case, and the spotlight of being exposed, had taken its toll. As for me, I focused on rebuilding, not just for my kids, but for myself. Therapy became a space to heal, not to fight, and I started rediscovering the parts of me I'd buried during years of trying to keep Lisa happy. One evening, while Jacob and Emma were playing in the yard, I sat on the porch and watched the sunset. It was a quiet moment, but it felt monumental. I'd been through hell and back, but I'd come out stronger, more certain of who I was and what I wanted. The scars Lisa left would never fully fade, but they didn't define me. Thanks for watching. Rate the story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel,